Well, look at Canada now. Canada isn't really our ally. They have a $1.2 trillion trade deficit. They're taking advantage of us. They're using us as a surrogate state. We can't really have free trade with Canada.
Well,
we have to pull them back.
The argument is literally that graph go up is short-sighted and stupid and leads to civilization collapse. A paraplegic 1 year after their accident and a lottery winner 1 year after winning register the same levels of happiness. Yes. The talking about people are not in poverty today. It's it's nebulous in that poverty will always exist because poverty is relative to the wealth of a nation. What we're talking about
is different measures. There's absolute measures of poverty as
well. And there are people that care about their traditions, their moral frameworks, and the idea of we're going to take the manufacturing from Michigan and send it to Mexico. It's a good thing because overall the numbers go up. Tell it to the families in Michigan who are forced to flee as the state collapses because the hard fixed costs of infrastructure don't change and the jobs are gone. Meaning for the average person, their share of taxes and services they have to pay for increases as people leave and there are no jobs.
Do you think the state of Michigan has collapsed?
Do you know what's going on in Michigan?
I live in Michigan.
Do you know what's going on in Michigan?
Yes.
As people, it is suffering the biggest net out migration. And what's happening, how do you get the Flint, Michigan crisis? What happened in
terrible local government.
Yeah, what happened in Flint, Michigan was that the hard cost to run a water infrastructure is the same no matter how many people live there up to a certain point. So when Detroit has, let's just use hypothetical numbers, 1 million people. And it costs $1 million per month to run that. Everyone spends $1 and nobody cares. When the jobs were gutted from the state and the state started experiencing a mass net out migration, the share per person for the cost of water increased dramatically to the point where this area had the highest water costs in the country because there were no jobs. Why? The jobs went to Mexico. Free trade. Amazing, isn't it? So what Flint, Michigan did was they said, our people are in poverty and can't afford the high cost of water from the Detroit infrastructure. Why don't we use the Flint River? And then you end up with Legionnaire's disease and this crisis where people are now suffering and dying and getting sick because they couldn't afford the massive infrastructure as the economy collapsed. Thank you, free trade. But don't worry, the graph went up.
It's not about free trade. It's about the decisions the local government made at every step of that process.
Not being able to afford water from Detroit because the auto manufacturing was gone?
Much poorer places than Flint, Michigan managed to not poison their own citizens with water. I mean, if
they didn't know that their water was bad, and they got off the expensive water from Detroit because they couldn't afford the infrastructure anymore.
And they didn't want to. They
didn't have the tax base. They didn't have the tax base because the jobs are gone and people are fleeing Michigan. If you need 1 million people to sustain a system and half of them jump ship, the cost double for everybody.
But I feel like we're kind of talking past each other because no one has ever said that free trade doesn't have consequences, that doesn't have downsides, that there aren't winners and losers.
And so what we're talking about here is
some people are left behind by economic progress.
The utilitarian argument versus the ideological argument.
That doesn't mean you try to freeze society in time.
You're saying the word progress over and over again because you're making an emotional play as something we should be doing, but it's not. Progress is a vague term that has no relevance here. We're talking about policy choices. It is not progress to hire slave labor in China. That is a policy opinion.
Obviously, slave labor is not progress. That's not most free trade is not slave labor.
We have to define these terms real fast for everyone because also breaking news: Trump's border czar Tom Homan just said right now that while he's deporting the illegals who have committed heinous crimes after Brad Polumbo said 1950s kitchens were worse than modern kitchens, he's deporting him too. So that's unfortunate. But ICE is on their way. No, but jokes aside, I do like 1950s kitchens, and I want to bring this up. So free trade, right? What do we define by that? I think what we're in an era where a lot of terms were defined to meet a culture where it was at, and now they've been abused. A good example, I want to juxtapose this. We're talking about immigration with birthright citizenship, right? We know Trump created this block on birthright citizenship, and people start accusing him as being racist. This idea that if you are both illegal parents and you come to this country and you have a kid on this solid ground in our borders, that your child can now be an American citizen. He's like, that's.
But wait, there's more. The executive order also says if you are a temporary visitor of legal status, you are still not being granted birthright.
Correct. And I look at that, and people might not understand this. I said I would explain this on the show. Someone asked me if I would. I had my child in Australia. I'm an American citizen. It was extremely hard to get my child American citizenship. People don't know that, actually. If you have your child overseas, it's not easy to get them over. It was like a 3-month process, multiple thousands of dollars. It was very, very difficult. Not only that, my wife is a green card permanent resident, and to get her over 7 months pregnant with our second child and not get those C-19 jabbies was also an incredibly difficult thing. Just getting a legal resident back in the country was hard. But also, I saw this process where, like, even as a citizen, just to get my kid's citizenship in America while I was overseas was so complex and so hard. I go, why is it I'm an American citizen and it's harder for me to get my kid's citizenship than it is for an illegal domestically to get their kid's citizenship? Why are they getting easier access to citizenship for their children than I have to mine around the world? Everything should be easier. At least we should be consistent.
It should be easier for you to get for your child. Yes.
Correct. But I was saying, it's funny because what they said constantly in the interviews at the USCIS was this. It's like, well, I kept finding it ironic with the birthright citizenship. They kept saying, yeah, well, like if one of the parents isn't an American, then your child's not an American. And then I'd be like, well, what other document do you need from, we need an original birth certificate and it's got to be, notarized in the US. And I'd be like, how do I get something notarized in the U.S. when I'm like, do I have to fly back? And they're like, maybe. And it was this months and multiple trips down to Sydney, from up in Brisbane. And I was laughing because I was sitting there, I told my wife, I go, what's funny? If we had just crossed the border illegally, we kept talking about that. I'm like, we could just cross the border illegally. My kid, give birth to this other kid. It'll be a citizen. Our kid won't get deported. He'll be a dreamer. You won't have to get those double jabs while pregnant. And I didn't really do anything illegal because the last time I crossed a border illegally was on January 6, 2021. And guess what? We're still fine. So,
so it's interesting though that.
But I meant that. But I just want to end on this, saying obviously the point is we are having discussions today of like, what does birthright citizenship mean, and was it really designed to have this abuse where you have an open border and people can just anchor baby? Right. But same with free trade. It's like, what is free trade? So like, if me and Tim have Pokemon cards and we're both friends and I know we have a high trust, society between us and I have my cards out and he's not going to steal my holographic Charizard. He's been looking at it. He wants it, but he's not going to steal it because he's an upstanding gentleman and he has at least $40 or more in his bank account. So that being said, we decide, hey, I'm going to close my eyes. You pick a card. I'll close my eyes. I'll pick a card on yours. It'll be random. And then we can't stop the trade. That's like free trade. It's blind. There's open for corruption, but it works because we trust each other. We know each other. We both, are he's in a way higher income bracket than me, but we're in high income brackets. And so there's some sort of connection. But if you brought me that, Walmart Haitian, guy who just came here and we're trading cards and he knows that my Charizard is worth $400, I'm really not going to trust to close my eyes and do a trade because look, I have reasons to doubt that this guy has my best interest in mind. I have reasons to doubt, not because he's black, not because he's Haitian, not because he has a low IQ, but simply because all those ideas combined, plus I don't know him, we don't share a culture, this changes our trade agreement. And we're going to have to set new standards, new rules, and new ideas. So free trade could work, let's say, even now. It's like, well, we have free trade with Canada. Well, look at Canada now. Canada isn't really our ally. They have a $1.2 trillion trade deficit. They're taking advantage of us. They're using us as a surrogate state. We can't really have free trade with Canada. We have to pull them back.
Having a trade deficit with them doesn't mean they're taking advantage of us.
Oh, they're taking advantage of us.
I have a trade deficit with my grocery store. They're not taking advantage of me.
No. That is a buying and selling. That is a transaction. They're not, their government itself is putting it up so that they are keeping their domestic production at their priority while then making sure that they're able to sell a lot of their exports to us while
Which
not
benefits us enormously.
Right. No. Some, but not all. I'm saying this idea of free trade, we are being abused in the United States, hands down, okay? Hands down. We are being, again, the R word.
How does it benefit us?
That's what I want to know. Why does it benefit having a $1.2 trillion trade deficit with Canada, considering the fact their economy is only a few $1 trillion? Like they're getting like 20-30% of their entire, revenue.
How does just trade with Canada benefit us?
Because so many things that we buy and sell and rely on, you think of lumber coming from Canada, you think of all the other imports that come into everything from housing to road construction to apparel to foods, all these things come in from Canada because they're able to be produced more affordably there, and then Americans enjoy those goods and services at lower prices
what would happen
than they would.
What would happen if Canada just said like, hey, we're cutting off access to the oil and the lumber?
Both countries would suffer.
So how would we suffer?
Free trade benefits both countries.
How would the U.S. suffer from that?
We would have to get it from somewhere that's more expensive or less efficient.
So let's say, I don't know, like a war broke out and then like trade just shuttered and there's no shipping lanes because they're under attack. What would the U.S. do to like, I don't know, build houses and roads and get fuel?
A war broke out between the U.S. and Canada?
No, in general, shutting down trade lines because cargo ships are shut down.
from the U.S. to Canada, the cargo ships, we'd lose control
I'm
of.
giving you a hypothetical to say, how would the U.S. survive not being able to produce these things?
It'd be terrible. It would have economic devastation for Americans.
Should the U.S. then not have a robust culture of self-reliance and the ability to produce these things at home?
Should we just be completely kind of produce everything ourselves, no matter how inefficient and costly it is?
Why is it inefficient?
We should try to afford.
Why is it inefficient?
Because the whole reason it's being done somewhere else is because it can be done more efficiently there.
No, that's not
true. That is
true.
literally the reason. If they could make it cheaper and more efficiently here, they would, because it costs
Inefficient
money to
is an
ship
argument.
things.
You need to explain. You see, inefficient, these are buzzwords that don't actually describe
No, it has a literal technical economic meaning.
Define it.
The reason that the reason that something is being brought in or purchased from overseas is because it can be made more affordably there.
That's a different word.
No, it's not. In economics, that's literally the same thing.
So slave labor is more efficient in China.
Slave labor is immoral.
Hell yeah.
So,
But we buy it. That's what free trade gets us. We get
China is a different situation than
Bangladesh,
most of our free
Indonesia,
trade.
insert Southeast Asian country that they're working for pennies on the dollar.
That is not the same thing as slave labor. Low wages and slaves are very different.
Indentured
Whoa, hold on.
servitude,
Tell the Foxconn employees who are marching off the rooftop in mass suicide they weren't slaves.
Where?
At Foxconn in China,
Put the
were
catching
walking,
nets.
they put catching nets because they were in mass lining up and walking off to commit mass suicide. Tell me that's not
terrible.
slave.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't
and
know
that's
about
free
it.
trade because we have no regulations over there. And Apple and these other computer manufacturers says we don't care if the employees are 16 people jammed in a 10 by 10 room to the point they can't quit. So they go up on top of the building, line up, and just walk off to die.
So
that's
then
free trade.
we should restrict trade with slave labor, but not make everything in America.
So you're saying that we should do trade with those who have the same moral values as us?
Well, not the same moral values.
Close
as
enough,
us,
close
but
enough.
There should obviously. I don't think
It's not free trade.
When we talk about free trade versus protectionism, it's a spectrum. And even the most diehard economists who advocate for free trade have always acknowledged there are certain narrow sub-exceptions where some protection can be appropriate.
So the things that I am upset about right now, you agree are actually bad.
Well, I don't think I agree about the scope of some of the things you're saying. No,
Like people in
or
China
that free
working
trade is
for-
all bad. Obviously, I think slave labor is bad.
You think it is efficient that
Many things can be made elsewhere in the world much
believe
more efficiently than in America.
It is efficient to have a low-skilled, low-wage worker in a foreign country do the job instead of an American.
Yes.
And so what happens in 10 years when the industry no longer exists in America?
You don't need it. Not every industry has to exist in America.
So what happened during COVID when we didn't have vitamin C or PPE?
Well, that's the problem with allowing global supply chains to be shut down. Governments across the world shut down supply chains and economies.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.